Sarah had never been one to believe in premonitions, but that day felt different. The air was heavy with a stillness that seemed unnatural, as if time itself had paused to watch the sunset. The clock on her wall ticked steadily, though each second felt drawn out, punctuated by a slow, deliberate beat. She stood at her window, sipping tea, watching the sky bleed into a palette of amber and crimson. The horizon swallowed the sun as it dipped lower, and for a moment, Sarah felt an unfamiliar tug in her chest, a soft ache. It wasn't sadness, nor joy, something deeper, as though her soul recognized the significance of the moment before her mind could comprehend. Her phone vibrated against the wooden table, snapping her out of her trance. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in years. It was David, her childhood friend, someone who had once meant the world to her but had long since drifted out of her life. She stared at the name for a few seconds, hesitating. What could he want after all this time? With a sigh, Sarah answered, "David?" "Hey, Sarah," came his voice, a familiar tone laced with nostalgia. "It's been a long time." She smiled softly. "It has. What made you call after all these years?" There was a pause on the other end. "I don't really know. I was just sitting here and I don't know. Something told me I needed to talk to you. Maybe it's that sunset outside. Feels like the kind of evening to reflect on things." Sarah looked back out the window. The sky was darker now, deep purples and blues swallowing the fading light. "Yeah," she said softly. "It does feel that way." They talked for a while, slipping into old memories with surprising ease. There was something comforting in the conversation, like revisiting an old home, yet underneath, Sarah felt a strange unease. It wasn't just David, it was the evening itself, the way the world seemed too quiet, too still. "Do you ever think about the choices we didn't make?" David asked. Suddenly his voice quieter now. Sarah felt the question settle in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. She had thought about it many times, the decisions that led them apart, the life they could have shared had they chosen differently. But she had learned to bury those thoughts, locking them away in the past where they belonged. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper, "but we can't live in what-ifs." David sighed. "No, I suppose not. But sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed, if I hadn't been so afraid." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. The truth was, she had wondered too. But life had a way of moving on, whether you were ready or not. And now, years later, here they were. Two people looking back at the crossroads they had left behind. The sun had fully set now, and darkness crept into the room. Sarah reached for the lamp, flicking it on, but the warm glow didn't chase away the strange heaviness in her heart. "I'm glad you called, David," she said after a moment. "Really. I am too," he replied, his voice softer, almost distant. "I think I just needed to hear your voice one last time." There was a silence that stretched between them, and for the first time Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" But David didn't answer. The line was dead. Sarah pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at the screen. A sudden sense of dread washed over her. She tried calling back, but the number was no longer in service. The stillness returned, pressing in on her from all sides. She stood frozen for a long moment, her heart pounding in her chest. The ache she had felt earlier had grown into something deeper, more unsettling. The next day, she received the news. David had passed away the night before, just as the sun had set.